This wedding was never about love. It was about power, about strengthening an alliance in a world that only recognized the laws of money and blood. Park Yin knew that from the very beginning. She knew that her father, Park Sang-ho, never truly cared for her. To him, she was nothing more than a tool, a pawn to ensure his business remained secure and his power unshaken. By marrying Yin to Jeon Jungkook, the heir of the Jeon family, the most powerful mafia in Korea, her father secured his position indefinitely. No one would dare touch Park Sang-ho when he was connected to the most feared family in the country, the Jeon family. And so, here she was, standing before the altar today, wearing a beautiful white wedding gown that felt more like an execution robe. In front of her, Jeon Jungkook stood tall in a white suit, a stark contrast to his reputation as a ruthless and merciless man. White was supposed to symbolize purity, but to Yin, it felt ironic. There was nothing pure about this marriage. Jungkook's gaze remained cold, but there was something in his eyes, something Yin couldn't quite decipher. The officiant began the ceremony, but his words felt hollow in Yin's ears. All she could feel was the tightness in her chest and the rapid pounding of her heart filled with despair. Then, the moment she dreaded arrived. Do you, Park Yin, take Jeon Jungkook to be your lawful husband? Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. There was no escape. If she refused, she knew exactly what would happen. Her father would destroy her, and Jungkook, who knew what this ruthless, merciless man would do to her. Yes, I do, she whispered. Do you, Jeon Jungkook, take Park Yin to be your lawful wife? Yes, I do, Jungkook answered in a deep, unwavering voice. And just like that, in the blink of an eye, Jungkook slid the wedding ring onto her finger, as if afraid she might change her mind if given more time. His sharp gaze remained locked onto her, and though his expression was unreadable, no one could have guessed how satisfied he felt at this moment. Because at last, he had claimed the woman who had unknowingly occupied his heart for so long. After the ceremony, a grand wedding reception took place. Important guests from businessmen and politicians to underground leaders all attended to pay their respects to the newlywed couple. Yin sat silently at the main table, while Jungkook remained by her side. You're not eating? Jungkook's deep, calm voice broke the silence. Yin turned to him, her gaze icy. I'm not hungry. Jungkook merely gave a faint smirk. Without saying another word, he casually picked up a piece of food with his fork and held it up to her lips. Eat, he said, his tone more of a command than an invitation. Yin stayed still, refusing to open her mouth. Jungkook observed her for a few moments before leaning in closer. His warm breath brushed against her ear as he whispered, You can hate me all you want, but sooner or later, you'll realize that there's no safer place than by my side. Yin glanced at him blankly, but before she could look away, Jungkook suddenly pressed a soft yet quick kiss against her lips, making her eyes widen in shock. Meanwhile, Jungkook only smirked. I could do something even bolder than this. If you refuse to eat from my hand, how about I feed you with my mouth instead? Yin's heart pounded. Whether from fear or something else, she wasn't sure. But one thing was certain, she had just married the most dangerous man in Korea. Not wanting to cause a scene in front of their guests, Yin reluctantly opened her mouth. Satisfied, Jungkook smiled and immediately fed her. Jungkook smiled with satisfaction as he watched Yin finally chew and swallow the food he had fed her. He felt as though he had won a small battle, even though Yin had only done it reluctantly. He wanted to feed her again, recalling how Yin had seemed unwilling earlier, but this time Yin took a deep breath and glared at him with sharp eyes. I'm not a baby to be fed, Yin said firmly, trying hard to hold back her emotions. Jungkook paused for a moment, disliking how Yin spoke to him in such a harsh tone. However, he didn't want to show his anger. Jungkook merely exhaled slowly, restraining himself. Sometimes Yin's words felt like a knife stabbing his heart. He never imagined that a man who had never cared for women like him could now feel hurt by the sharp words of Yin. Fine, eat on your own, Jungkook replied in a flat tone, trying to hide his displeasure. However, even though he gave Yin the freedom to eat by herself, he couldn't fully let her go. With his right hand, Jungkook reached for Yin's free left hand on the table. Slowly and gently, he gripped it tightly and moved their hands under the table. Yin, feeling uncomfortable, looked down, trying to pull her hand away from his grip, but Jungkook glared at her sharply. His gaze seemed to radiate a command that could not be defied. Don't try to pull your hand away, Jungkook said softly but with pressure, his voice low and threatening. Just leave it like this. You have to get used to my touch, because sooner or later, you'll feel more than this from me, so, don't reject it. Yin bit her lower lip, her cheeks suddenly burning at Jungkook's words, her heartbeat quickening. She wanted to pull her hand away, but her eyes were trapped in Jungkook's sharp gaze, which left no space for her to withdraw. I know you don't like this, but sooner or later, you'll get used to it, he added, his tone softer, though his eyes remained sharp. Yin let out a heavy sigh. She chose to focus on enjoying her meal rather than dwelling on her fluttering heart from being so close to him. After the wedding party was over, Jungkook immediately took Yin to live in his private mansion. Yin had already entered Jungkook's room, feeling anxious but trying to maintain her composure. She had showered and changed into a comfortable nightgown. Since then, Jungkook hadn't entered the room, and Yin didn't care. She just covered herself with the blanket, feeling her eyes grow heavy, and without realizing it, she fell asleep. She wasn't sure how long she had slept, but her sleep was disturbed when she felt soft kisses around her neck. Unconsciously, a soft escaped her lips, and at that moment, she realized what was happening. Her heart raced as she realized that Jungkook was touching her. Her husband, who had apparently showered and changed into comfortable sleepwear, now smelled fresh, and his presence felt closer than ever. For a moment, Yin allowed herself to enjoy his touch, but then, she quickly stopped him and pushed his head away. Their eyes met in silence, but there was something in Jungkook's gaze that made Yin nervous. Jungkook remained silent, only watching her as if waiting for her response. Hesitantly, Yin finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. I want to delay our first night, she said softly, trying to avoid Jungkook's sharp gaze. Jungkook looked at her with confusion, as if not understanding. Why? Didn't you enjoy it earlier? He asked, his tone calm. Yin's face turned red from embarrassment. She felt awkward, unsure how to explain her feelings. Finally, after taking a deep breath, she said carefully, I don't want to do it unless it's because of love. Jungkook let out a long sigh, as if he had been thinking about what to say for a while. Actually, Jungkook said in a low yet firm voice, I've loved you for a long time. Yin was taken aback, her mouth slightly open, her gaze fixed on Jungkook. What? Yin's voice sounded like a whisper she couldn't control. Jungkook continued in a calmer tone, this marriage, everything that's happening, was actually my request. I asked your father and mine to arrange this marriage. It's not just a business agreement between two families. I wanted to marry you. Yin was still stunned, trying to process Jungkook's words. However, Jungkook didn't stop there. His expression grew serious. I don't like being rejected, he said in a deeper tone. That's why I used the excuse of our family business to make you marry me. That way, you couldn't say no. Yin swallowed hard, her hands still holding Jungkook's chest. She was actually quite surprised by Jungkook's confession, but she was also unsure how to respond to it. Alright, but I still don't want to do it now. I'm not ready for this. Jungkook smirked slightly, then leaned down and kissed his wife's forehead. Fine, as long as you don't make me angry. Never speak harshly or give me a cynical look, or I'll do it with or without your permission. After saying that, Jungkook immediately lay down next to her. Sleep now. Sorry for disturbing you. You must be tired. It had been a month since their wedding, yet Yin still showed no signs of opening her heart to Jungkook. Although she was no longer as cold as she had been at the beginning of their marriage, it was still clear that she maintained a distance from her husband. Jungkook, on the other hand, never allowed Yin to go anywhere alone without the presence of his guards. Every time she wanted to go out, whether for a walk or to shop for her personal needs, there were always men in suits silently following her. At first, Yin tried to ignore them, but as time passed, their presence began to feel like shackles. At least when she lived with her parents, she was never watched this closely. One day, as she was getting ready to go to the salon, Yin found two well-built men already standing by the door, ready to escort her as usual. She let out a small sigh and turned to look at Jungkook, who was standing not far away. Can I go out without them? She asked, her voice calm, though there was a hint of irritation. Jungkook, who was fastening his watch, glanced at her briefly before responding in a flat tone, no. Yin bit her lip, trying to suppress her frustration. I'm not a child, Jungkook. I can take care of myself. Jungkook finally looked at her directly, his expression as cold as ever. You are my wife, and my wife must not walk around without protection. Yin let out a sharp breath. I used to live freely. I could go anywhere without someone watching my every move. Why do I have to be monitored like this now? Jungkook stepped closer, his face still calm, but there was a sharp glint in his eyes. Because you are no longer Park Yin, you are now Jeon Yin. He stopped right in front of her, lowering his voice to something softer, yet still firm. And there are many people out there who want to hurt me, by hurting you. Yin fell silent. Jungkook's words hit her with a harsh reality. Seeing that she was no longer arguing, Jungkook reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Don't argue about this again, he murmured before turning away. Yin clenched her fingers tightly, trying to suppress the frustration bubbling inside her. She hated to admit it, but this time, Jungkook was right. On a Saturday morning, in a spacious dining room with a neatly arranged breakfast spread, Yin sat hesitantly, stirring her porridge without any real intention of eating it. Across from her, Jungkook calmly sipped his black coffee, while occasionally reading something on his phone. Taking a deep breath, Yin finally gathered the courage to speak. "Jungkook," she called softly. Jungkook lifted his gaze from the screen, his expression unreadable. Yin bit her lip for a moment before continuing. "Today, I want to go to a cafe to meet my old college friends. We've been wanting to meet for a long time, but everyone has been busy. Since it's the weekend, I thought this would be the perfect time." Jungkook didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her in silence, as if waiting for her to continue. "I want to go, without bodyguards," she finally added, her voice hesitant. Jungkook's eyes narrowed slightly before he calmly placed his phone on the table. "No." That one-word answer made Yin sigh in frustration. She had expected it, but hearing the rejection still annoyed her. "I just want to spend time with them without feeling watched. I'm sure nothing will happen," Yin tried to reason. Jungkook remained composed, leaning back on his chair. "If you feel uncomfortable, I can have them watch you from a distance. They won't be visible and won't interfere. But if you're asking to go completely unsupervised, then it's better if you don't go out at all." Yin fell silent, glaring at him in frustration. He was far stricter than she had imagined. "You're being excessive, Jungkook." Jungkook raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm simply ensuring your safety." "But I'm fine." Yin was starting to lose patience. Jungkook gazed at her intently before leaning slightly forward. His voice was low but firm. "Listen carefully, Yin. I won't take even the smallest risk when it comes to your safety." Yin bit her lip, holding back her emotions. She knew Jungkook was stubborn, but she never expected it would be this difficult to convince him. "So, what will it be?" Jungkook asked again. "Go out with guards watching from afar, or stay home?" Yin exhaled heavily, realizing she had no other choice. "Fine," she muttered, defeated. Jungkook nodded in satisfaction. "Good, now, eat your breakfast." Yin shot him a glare, but still picked up her spoon and started eating, though her heart was still filled with irritation. When Yin arrived at the cafe, Mina and Yuju were already waiting at a corner table. They immediately waved at her. "Yin, you finally made it," Mina called out cheerfully, while Yuju grinned widely. "I thought you were going to cancel on us," Yuju teased. Yin simply gave a small smile and sat with them. It had been a long time since she had hung out with her friends, so despite the nagging feeling of Jungkook's overprotectiveness, she tried to enjoy the moment. But the atmosphere shifted when two of their male classmates from university, Bam Bam and Yugyeom, approached their table. Yin didn't mind Bam Bam's presence since he was close to Yuju and often joined their group during college. But Yugyeom was a different story. Back in college, Yugyeom had openly liked her and despite multiple rejections, never gave up. Now, after all this time, Yin wasn't sure if his feelings had changed or remained the same. And it didn't take long for her to find out. From the moment he sat down, Yugyeom constantly sought ways to get closer to Yin, asking about her life excessively, leaning in whenever he spoke, and even touching her arm occasionally. "You've gotten even prettier," Yugyeom suddenly said, causing Yin, who was sipping her matcha latte, to nearly choke. Mina and Yuju simply laughed, oblivious to Yin's discomfort. "I'm still the same as before," Yin replied flatly. "Not really," Yugyeom smirked, his gaze sharp. "Back then, you kept rejecting me, but this time, I won't waste my chance." Yin frowned, feeling uneasy with his tone. She wanted to tell him that she was married, but then she remembered, she had never told any of her friends about her marriage. She hadn't even invited them to her wedding because she hadn't wanted the marriage in the first place. "Are you still hoping for Yin? Hey, didn't you say earlier that you wouldn't bother her anymore?" Bam Bam joked, trying to lighten the mood. But Yugyeom ignored him. Instead, he became even more aggressive. Casually, he draped an arm around Yin's shoulders, pulling her closer. "It's been so long since we last met. I missed you," he murmured in a low voice near her ear. Yin stiffened. She wanted to move away, but Yugyeom's grip tightened. "Yugyeom, let go," she said, her tone warning. "Hey, am I really that repulsive to you?" he asked dramatically. Yin sighed. "Don't ruin my mood, Yugyeom." Yugyeom chuckled. Just stay like this for a bit. You have no idea how much I missed you. Fed up, Yin elbowed him in the ribs, not too hard, but enough to make him loosen his hold. At that exact moment, from a distance, a man in a black suit discreetly raised his phone and snapped several pictures of the scene. The guards assigned to watch Yin didn't hesitate. Within seconds, the images were sent to one person. And that person was none other than their boss, Jungkook. Inside his private office, Jungkook sat behind a large desk cluttered with documents. He was busy reviewing his family's business reports, signing a few papers, and reading important emails on his laptop. The room was silent, with only the ticking of the wall clock occasionally breaking the stillness. But that peace was shattered when his phone vibrated on the table. A message had arrived from one of his bodyguards. At first, Jungkook didn't pay much attention, assuming it was just a routine report about Yin's whereabouts. But the moment he opened the message, his eyes sharpened. A video and photos. Jungkook tapped on the video. The screen immediately showed Yin sitting inside a cafe, surrounded by her friends. 2 women were seated with her, and then there were 2 men. His gaze instantly locked onto one of them. In the video, the man was clearly trying to get close to Yin, speaking to her in an overly familiar manner. Jungkook clenched his jaw when he saw the man leaning in closer, then, without hesitation, draping his arm around her shoulders. His fingers curled into a fist on the table. Damn it, he gripped his phone tightly. All this time, he had been holding himself back from touching his wife, respecting the boundaries Yin had set since the beginning of their marriage. And now, while he struggled to control himself, Yin was letting another man touch her. Fury ignited in his chest, his jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened. With a sharp motion, Jungkook grabbed his phone and dialed a number. Bring her home, now. His voice was cold and sharp. Right now. Without waiting for a response, he ended the call. His eyes remained fixed on the screen displaying those incriminating photos. His chest rose and fell with restrained anger, on the verge of erupting. The office door suddenly swung open with force, causing a loud thud that shattered the silence in the room. Yin stormed in, her face flushed with anger. Her breathing was still heavy after what had just happened. Earlier, while she was chatting with her friends, 2 bodyguards had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and without much explanation, ordered her to go home. It didn't take much thinking to realize that this was definitely her husband's doing. And when she saw Jungkook sitting calmly behind his desk, staring at her with an expressionless face, her irritation only grew. You, she snapped, pointing at Jungkook with sharp eyes. This was your doing, wasn't it? You sent them to take me home like this? Jungkook didn't respond right away. He simply stared at Yin with dark, cold eyes. Then, with a slow and deliberate movement, he tossed his phone onto the desk. Yin frowned and lowered her gaze to the still-lit screen, and in an instant, her breath hitched. There, clear as day, were several photos of her, more specifically, the moment Yugyeom had his arm around her at the cafe. Her eyes widened in shock, unable to believe that someone had taken those pictures. But she quickly realized who had done it, the bodyguard who had been secretly watching her from afar. Jungkook. What is this? Jungkook cut her off sharply, his voice so cold that it sent a shiver down Yin's spine. Yin bit her lip, trying to calm herself before speaking. He's just an old friend, she finally said. Besides, I rejected him after that. You can ask my friends if you don't believe me. However, instead of easing up, Jungkook's gaze only darkened. His jaw tightened, and he leaned back in his chair, his expression filled with restrained anger. After that, he repeated, his tone dripping with sarcasm. So what you're saying is, you let him do it first before rejecting him? Yin frowned. That's not what I meant. Too late, Jungkook cut in coldly. If you had rejected him right away, he wouldn't have had the chance to touch you. Yin fell silent. She hadn't expected Jungkook to react like this. You're overreacting, Jungkook. His eyes flickered at her words, but this time, instead of letting his anger explode further, Jungkook simply fell silent. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and exhaled slowly. Then, in a voice so calm that it somehow felt even sharper than his rage, he said, "All right." Yin frowned in confusion. What? Jungkook met her gaze directly. From now on, do whatever you want. I won't stop you anymore. Yin was stunned. This is what you've always wanted, isn't it? Jungkook continued in a flat tone, but the darkness in his eyes betrayed his true emotions. If that's what you want, then go ahead. I won't interfere anymore. Sorry if I was too much involved in your business. After saying that, Jungkook stood up from his chair, as if signaling that their conversation was over. Yin remained frozen in place, an inexplicable tightness forming in her chest. Why? Why did it hurt more to hear him say that? Since that incident, Jungkook had been giving her the silent treatment. In their bedroom, where he used to sleep on his back or deliberately lay on his side facing her, he now slept with his back turned to her. Even during breakfast and dinner, Jungkook was more focused on his phone, as if Yin wasn't even there with him. Truthfully, Yin felt awkward with this ongoing silence between them. Yes, their relationship had never been warm or perfect to begin with, but at least it wasn't this cold. She wanted to start a conversation with him, but a part of her was still upset. However, it seemed that both of them were still upset and neither was willing to back down. On a scorching afternoon, Yin sat inside her car, cruising steadily through the city streets. She was heading to a salon to indulge in a little self-care, perhaps a cream bath or a hair spa, anything that could lighten her mind from the exhaustion and endless thoughts about her relationship with Jungkook. Every now and then, she leaned her head against the car seat, gazing out the window while taking deep breaths, trying to stay focused on driving. The afternoon heat was intense, but the air inside the car was comfortable. She felt a bit freer, because, for the first time since getting married, there were no bodyguards tailing her from a distance. Maybe Jungkook really doesn't care anymore, she thought as she stared at the empty road ahead. But strangely, that feeling didn't bring her relief. A part of her heart felt lonelier than ever. Yin gently ran her fingers through her hair. Enough, stop thinking about it, she murmured to herself. Today is for relaxing. But in her deep thoughts, Yin failed to notice the lurking danger. A large bus was swerving out of control from the opposite direction. The driver had lost command of the vehicle, making it wobble unstably on the road. A long, blaring honk startled the surrounding drivers, prompting them to pull over quickly. But it was too late. The bus crashed into a large tree by the roadside, and its massive body grazed Yin's car as it was passing by. The impact was unavoidable. Yin's car spun before slamming into the curb. The windshield shattered, sending shards of glass flying everywhere. The scene turned chaotic in an instant. Shouts filled the air, the sound of screeching brakes echoed, and panic spread throughout the area. Several bus passengers were injured, some lightly, while others suffered more serious wounds. The bus driver lay unconscious in his seat. Inside the wrecked car, Yin slumped against her seat. Her hands and temple were bleeding from the broken glass, her breaths coming in ragged gasps, and her vision beginning to blur. She was still conscious, but her body ached all over, feeling too heavy to move. Ugh, she groaned softly, attempting to reach for her phone inside her bag, but her trembling fingers struggled to grasp it. Around her, a growing crowd of onlookers rushed to help. Some called for an ambulance and the police, while others attempted to pry open Yin's badly dented car door. Amid the chaos, Yin could only endure the pain with her eyes closed. And in the silence of her mind, one name surfaced: Jungkook. The hospital ward was bustling with activity. Several accident victims from the earlier crash were gathered in the same room, including Yin. She was now awake, sitting on her hospital bed with a vacant stare directed at the window. A nurse had just finished tending to her wounds, wrapping a bandage around her scratched wrist and applying a dressing to her temple, which had been hit by glass shards. Fortunately, her injuries weren't too severe, but her body still ached from the impact. Yin took a deep breath. It all felt like a nightmare. She never expected her day to end like this. All she wanted was a brief escape from her troubles, to step out without supervision, to enjoy the freedom Jungkook had granted her. But fate had other plans, landing her in a hospital instead. And what made it worse was that this happened when things between her and Jungkook were already in shambles. It felt as if the universe was trying to teach her a lesson. Yin bit her lip, a mix of guilt and frustration welling up inside her. She didn't want to think of this as karma, but the heaviness in her chest was undeniable. Her thoughts were interrupted when a hospital staff member approached her, holding a form in their hands. "Sorry to bother you, miss. We need your personal details as well as a contact for a family member we can reach," the staff said politely. Yin froze. She stared at the form in the staff's hand, biting her lip in hesitation. If she gave them her parents' number, they would undoubtedly panic and scold her endlessly. They would blame her for going out unguarded and possibly even for the ongoing tensions with Jungkook. But if the hospital called Jungkook, Yin swallowed hard. Her husband's image flashed in her mind, his cold, expressionless face, laced with quiet anger. He would probably mock her now. He might say, "The one time you go out without supervision, you end up in an accident. See? In the end, you still rely on me." No, Yin wasn't ready to face Jungkook in this condition. Quickly composing herself, she forced a small smile at the hospital staff. My parents are currently overseas, and my husband is out of town for work, she said convincingly. So, I'll give you my cousin's number instead. She'll handle everything. The staff hesitated briefly, but eventually nodded. All right, please provide the number. Yin immediately recited Susie's number, her most reliable cousin. At least Susie could cooperate and wouldn't cause unnecessary drama. After noting down the details, the hospital staff thanked her and left to contact Susie. Meanwhile, Yin leaned back against the pillow, her gaze fixed on the ceiling as a whirlwind of emotions stirred within her. After going through various procedures, Yin was finally transferred to a VIP inpatient room at her request and with Susie's help. The room was much more comfortable than the previous ward, spacious, quiet, and fully equipped with all the necessary facilities. However, none of this comfort could erase the frustration she felt. Susie had been nagging nonstop. I told you, this is all your fault. Why are you so stubborn, huh? Susie crossed her arms, staring at Yin with an annoyed expression. Now you're injured, and you're still trying to hide it from Jungkook. Do you really think he won't find out? Yin let out a tired sigh. Her head still felt heavy, and Susie's endless complaints were pounding her mind like crashing waves. I just don't want to deal with him right now, sister, she muttered, staring blankly out the window. Our relationship is already strained. I don't want to hear him say I told you so or anything like that. Susie rubbed her face in frustration. What if he finds out that I helped you hide this from him? If he shoots me dead, will you be able to bring me back to life? Yin scoffed. Come on, he wouldn't shoot you over something like this. Susie let out a long sigh. Whatever, but I can't just sit back and watch this happen. I'm going out to get some food. You should rest. Yin simply nodded in resignation. Her body felt exhausted, and her eyelids were growing heavy. Susie gave her a small smile before walking out of the room with a calm stride. But there was one thing Yin didn't know. Susie's real intention wasn't just to get food. The moment the door closed behind her, Susie immediately grabbed her phone and typed quickly. Jungkook had to know, and she would make sure Yin's husband got to this hospital as soon as possible. About an hour later, Yin's deep sleep was slightly disturbed when she felt something, a warm touch gently holding her hand. Slowly, her eyelids fluttered, and when she finally opened her eyes, the sight before her made her freeze. Jungkook, her husband, was sitting beside her bed, gazing at her with deep concern. Yin's heart pounded. A whirlwind of emotions filled her chest, awkwardness, embarrassment, and something else she couldn't quite name. She was not ready to face Jungkook in this situation. But what surprised her even more was his expression. There was no cold stare, no angry glare like she had expected, no sign of irritation or blame in his eyes. Instead, Jungkook's gaze was gentle, filled with genuine worry. Yin swallowed hard, trying to collect her thoughts. She had expected him to scold her, to ask in frustration why she hadn't called him, or to say something that would make her feel guilty. However, the first words that left his lips were completely unexpected. How are you feeling? His voice was deep, full of warmth. Are you in pain? Where does it hurt? Yin was speechless. A tight sensation gripped her chest, a mix of emotions she couldn't quite decipher. She had been wrong. Jungkook hadn't come here to lecture her. He had come as a husband who was truly worried about his wife. She remained silent, but as the seconds passed, her eyes began to sting. A heavy weight she had been carrying in her heart suddenly felt overwhelming. And then, without warning, tears spilled down her cheeks. It wasn't because of the physical pain, not because of the injuries on her hands or head, but because of him, because of that gentle gaze, because of the warmth of his touch. It made her heart ache in a way she didn't understand. She wanted to cry so badly. Jungkook's eyes widened in surprise. Yin? But instead of answering his questions, Yin bit her lip, trying to hold back her sobs. It was useless. Her voice trembled as she finally let out the words she had been holding in for so long. I'm sorry. Jungkook froze. I'm so sorry, Yin repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The words she had refused to say before, the ones blocked by her pride, had finally slipped past her lips. Jungkook stared at her in silence. Then, his lips curved into a small, soft smile. Without hesitation, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss on her forehead. When he pulled away, his voice was barely above a whisper. I already forgave you, even before you apologized. Fresh tears welled up in Yin's eyes, flowing even harder. But before she could say anything, Jungkook sighed softly and gave her a small, almost guilty smile. I should be the one apologizing, he said sincerely. I know I've been too strict. My rules were too much. I also know I haven't been a good husband. I should have made you feel comfortable around me, but I didn't. Yin looked at him with teary eyes, her heart swelling with emotions. Jungkook gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. Instinctively, Yin tightened her grip around his fingers, as if she didn't want to let go. For a while, Jungkook simply ran his fingers through her hair, comforting her in silence. Then, after a few moments, he finally spoke again. "Tell me, what exactly happened?" Yin hesitated, but Jungkook's gaze remained calm, without a hint of judgment. Eventually, she took a deep breath and started explaining. She told him everything: why she went out alone, why she wanted some space, how she got lost in thought and ended up in an accident. Jungkook listened without interrupting. There was no anger, no blame, just quiet understanding. Once she finished, he stayed silent for a moment, processing everything she had said. Then, without another word, he reached for the bowl of porridge on the side table. He stirred it gently before scooping up a spoonful. "Eat a little," he said softly. Yin shook her head. "I'm not hungry." Jungkook gave her a patient look. "You need to eat to recover." "Later," she murmured. Jungkook let out a quiet sigh. Without arguing, he blew on the spoonful of porridge to cool it down, then held it up to her lips. "Just one bite," he coaxed gently. "If you really don't want more after that, I won't force you." Yin let out a quiet whine. "Jungkook, I..." "One bite," he repeated with a small smile. Yin sighed, knowing she wouldn't win this argument. Reluctantly, she opened her mouth, letting him feed her. The warm porridge melted on her tongue, and surprisingly, it felt soothing. She hadn't realized how empty her stomach had been until now. Jungkook's lips quirked up slightly. "See? Not so bad, right?" Yin merely glanced at him without responding, but when Jungkook scooped up another spoonful and brought it to her again, this time, she didn't refuse. A faint smile unknowingly formed on her lips. She felt grateful that Jungkook hadn't changed. And for some reason, the attention from him that once felt irritating, now felt surprisingly pleasant.